Fire has powered human survival for hundreds of thousands of years, but one of its smartest uses was never flashy, never portable, and never sold in a box. And yet it quietly solved problems that today's camping gear still struggles with. Before lightweight stoves, before foil packets, before temperature gauges and fuel canisters, people across the world cooked entire meals underground, using nothing but soil, stone, and, well, patience. This was the earth oven. And once you understand how it worked, it becomes obvious why it fed villages, travelled with nomads, and outperformed many modern outdoor cooking setups in the one area that matters most in survival: reliability. What an earth oven really is. An earth oven is exactly what it sounds like. A pit dug into the ground, heated with stones and fire, then used to slow-cook food beneath layers of earth. No metal, no moving parts, no fragile systems, just thermal mass and basic physics doing the heavy lifting. Archaeological evidence places earth ovens as far back as the Paleolithic period. Versions of them were used by indigenous Australians, Polynesians, Native American tribes, early Europeans, and rural communities well into the early 20th century. Different cultures gave them different names, but the principle stayed the same. Heat stones, load food, seal it, walk away. This was not primitive cooking. It was efficient cooking. The ground acted as insulation, the stones stored energy, and the sealed pit created a stable cooking environment that modern campers still try to replicate with expensive gear. Here's the part that surprises most people. Earth ovens were not just for convenience. They were a response to uncertainty. When fuel was scarce, when weather was unpredictable, and when feeding many people mattered more than speed, this method made sense. Once heated, an earth oven keeps cooking for hours without added fuel. Wind does not matter. Rain does not matter. Temperature swings barely matter. You invest energy once, then let physics handle the rest. That is why these ovens appear again and again in survival contexts. They are resilient systems. Nothing to break, nothing to clog, nothing to run out of, except time. And time was something ancient communities understood how to use. The process starts with a pit, usually shallow but wide enough to hold stones and food. Hard stones are essential. Soft or wet stones can crack or explode when heated. This is one of the few rules that mattered, and ancient people learned it early. A fire is built directly in the pit. The goal is not flame, but heat. The stones absorb energy as the fire burns down into embers. Once the stones are hot, ashes are scraped aside and food is placed inside, often wrapped in leaves, cloth, or natural fibres. Then comes the seal. Earth is piled back on top, trapping heat inside. Oxygen is cut off, the temperature stabilizes. What follows is slow, even cooking, that can last anywhere from 1 hour to an entire day, depending on the size of the pit and the food inside. No turning, no checking, no babysitting. Modern camping stoves are, optimized for speed and portability, not resilience. They work well until, fuel runs out, parts fail, or conditions change. An earth oven does not care about any of that. It handles large quantities of food effortlessly. It does not burn meals because, honestly, temperatures rise slowly and fall gradually. It works in freezing cold and extreme wind. And it uses materials found almost anywhere on Earth. In a real survival situation, those traits matter more than convenience. The earth oven trades speed for certainty. And certainty is, you know, the currency of survival. This is why explorers, pioneers and rural communities continued using earth ovens long after metal cookware existed. They were not behind the times. They were choosing the tool that failed the least. Here's the interesting part. Earth ovens are far more precise than they appear. Experienced users could judge temperature by the color of stones, the length of the fire burn, and the type of soil used for sealing. Clay-rich soil holds heat longer, while sandy soil cools faster. Larger stones store more energy, and smaller pits heat quicker. Over generations, these variables became instinctive knowledge. That is how bread, roots, meat and even desserts were cooked consistently without thermometers. It was not guesswork. It was accumulated understanding. This is also why many early ethnographers underestimated these techniques. They saw simplicity and assumed lack of sophistication. In reality, this was thermal engineering passed down through practice. Earth ovens were also safer than open-fire cooking in many contexts. The sealed environment reduced contamination, and slow cooking broke down tough fibers, making food easier to digest. Roots and tubers that were otherwise inedible became safe and nourishing. This mattered deeply in environments where food variety was limited. Cooking methods were survival strategies, not lifestyle choices. Modern survival manuals still echo these principles. Slow, moist heat maximizes calories, and consistent temperatures reduce waste. Earth ovens delivered both long before the science was formalized. The decline of earth ovens had little to do with effectiveness. It really came down to lifestyle changes, you know. Urbanization, time pressure, and the shift toward individual meals instead of communal ones all played a role. Portable stoves just made sense when people started moving faster and cooking smaller portions. But the knowledge never disappeared completely. It lingered in rural traditions, archaeological records, and even survival training manuals. It waited quietly for a moment when people would look past convenience and rediscover reliability. That moment is now. Building an earth oven today does not require ancient living. It requires, well, patience and respect for the process. The biggest mistake beginners make is rushing. Not enough heat. Poor stone selection. Weak sealing. Do it right and the results are remarkable. Meat that falls apart without burning. Vegetables that retain moisture and flavor. Bread with a crust you cannot fake with a pan. More importantly, you gain a system that works when everything else stops working. So, this is why earth ovens are taught in long-term survival courses, not just your average weekend camping guides. They're not tricks, you know. They're infrastructure. The earth oven is a reminder that survival, well, it's not really about gear. It's about systems. Ancient people, they built solutions that aligned with natural forces, instead of fighting against them. They stored heat rather than chasing flames all the time. They insulated instead of constantly fueling. And they designed for failure tolerance, not perfection. That mindset is what modern survival culture often misses. You know, more tools do not equal more safety. Better understanding does. And that is the real lesson buried in the soil. In a world obsessed with upgrades, the earth oven feels almost, well, rebellious. It asks you to slow down, to think ahead, to trust process over gadgets. It also connects you to a lineage of people who solved the same problems without electricity, supply chains, or manuals. They survived because their solutions were simple, adaptable, and honestly hard to break. That is not nostalgia. That is strategy. If you care about resilience, real-world preparedness, and the kind of knowledge that works when conditions are bad, this is the kind of technique worth remembering. If this kind of forgotten wisdom speaks to you, stay connected to Legacy of Survival. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who values practical knowledge over hype. These stories matter, and keeping them alive might matter more than we think.